The Olympic Peninsula was all fog and silence. A place where the trees never told what they saw, and the ocean never stopped trying to drown the past. Logan Thorne stood at the edge of the bluff, boots buried in damp moss, his breath curling into the grey. Below him, the Pacific battered the coastline like it was trying to break something loose. Behind him the forest loomed, a wall of green and shadow, but it was the silence that pressed hardest. No gunfire, no radio chatter, just the endless hush of a man trying to outlive his ghosts. He didn't come here for peace, he came to disappear. Logan's cabin was a skeleton of timber and stone, functional, uninviting, deliberately hard to find. No electricity, no cell signal, no reminders of the life he used to lead. Just him, his past, and the only living creature that didn't flinch at the sound of nightmares. Ghost. The German shepherd was a shade of black and ash, built lean but strong. His ears twitched at every crack in the brush, every rustle in the undergrowth. He didn't bark. He didn't beg. He simply watched, always alert, always reading the world in a language Logan had long forgotten. Ghost had served beside Logan in places no one ever came back from whole. Iraq, Yemen, a compound in Kandahar that no longer existed. Where Logan had lost his swim buddy, Dean. The same mission that got them both burned. One physically, one emotionally. It had been 16 months since Logan handed in his gear and walked off the grid. Since then, his days were an echo of routine. Wake before dawn. Run the coast with Ghost. Sharpen the blades, clean the weapons, eat little, sleep less. Today was supposed to be no different. But that morning, when the tide was still low and the sea was crawling back to its cold bed, Ghost broke pattern. They were moving along the shore, Logan a few feet behind, watching the dog's gait, his ears, his tail. Ghost slowed, then stopped. His nose lifted to the wind. Something in the air. He turned sharply toward the tree line. Logan followed his stare. Nothing but ferns and fog and moss-covered trunks. The forest had always been a wall, not a path. Ghost growled low, not aggressive, but certain. A rumble from deep in his chest, the kind that said something was wrong, not dangerous. Different. Logan didn't ask questions. He crouched beside him. What is it? Ghost took a step forward, then looked back. And Logan knew. Show me. The dog moved, slipping between ferns and under fallen branches, his body a tense shadow. Logan followed, knife at his side, steps silent. The forest swallowed them whole. Light died first, then sound. It became hard to tell if they were walking into something or away from it. The incline grew. Ghost paused occasionally, nose twitching, adjusting his path like a bloodhound chasing a scent only he understood. They climbed for maybe 20 minutes. Then Ghost stopped. Up ahead, almost hidden by a fold in the hill and a curtain of vines, stood something impossible. A cabin. Old, weathered, its logs dark with age. Moss thick on the roof. The kind of place you'd expect to find in a ghost story, not reality. There were no paths leading to it, no tire tracks, no chimney smoke, no signs of life. But Ghost moved closer, slow, deliberate. Logan followed, every nerve tight. He scanned for movement, for traps, for heat shimmer, muscle memory kicking in. Then he heard it. A cough. Dry, weak, human. Then a voice, barely a whisper, from behind the thick wooden door. "Please, is someone there?" Ghost let out a short bark, low and soft. Not alarm, not attack. Just a message. "We're here." Logan approached the door, hand hovering over the handle. He didn't knock. He pushed it open. The interior hit him like a gut punch. Cold. Dark. The air stale with illness and fear. A small fire struggled in the hearth. Blankets were stacked in a corner, and on a cot, barely conscious, was a woman. pale, sweating, thin. Her lips cracked from dehydration. But it wasn't her that made Logan stop dead. It was the child, a little girl, maybe 5, standing like a ghost at the far wall, half in shadow, her hair tangled, eyes dark, wide, too still for her age. She didn't cry, didn't run, just stared at Logan like she had been waiting for him. The woman tried to speak. Her voice cracked like dry paper. "You followed the dog." Logan nodded once. His voice felt foreign in his throat. "He led me here." The girl didn't blink. Logan scanned the room, his instincts cataloguing everything. No food, no radio, no weapons in sight. Only one exit, no windows facing the clearing. It was a defensive structure. Whoever built it didn't want to be found. Ghost moved to the girl's side, sat next to her like a guardian. That was when Logan understood. This wasn't coincidence. This was a mission. He had tried to escape war and walked straight into another. The woman looked up at him, barely able to lift her head. "We can't leave," she whispered. "He'll find us." "Who?" Her eyes flicked toward the girl. "He's looking for her." And Logan felt something shift inside. The same feeling that came before every firefight. The quiet before hell broke loose. He looked at Ghost, who didn't move, just watched him with those amber eyes, still guarding, still leading, still right. And Logan made his choice. Not today, not this time. He wasn't going to walk away, not again. The cabin was holding its breath. Logan stepped fully inside, closing the door behind him with a soft thud. The dim firelight cast flickering shadows across the walls, painting the small space in warm gold and deep, uncertain browns. Every instinct told him to stay on guard, but something quieter, older, told him to listen. The woman on the cot stirred. Her skin was pale, flushed in patches with fever. Her breathing was shallow. Sweat slicked her forehead and darkened her shirt at the collarbones. Her hair, once carefully cut, now hung limp and damp around her cheeks. He crouched beside her, his voice calm, clinical. "You're dehydrated. How long have you had the fever?" Her eyes fluttered open, wide and bloodshot. When she tried to speak, only a cracked whisper came out. 3 days? Maybe 4. I can't keep anything down." Logan studied her. She was young, late 20s maybe, but life had clearly taken more than her years. There was resilience in her jawline, a tightness in her grip on the blanket. But it was fading fast. He turned to look at the girl. "Nora," the woman rasped. The child flinched at her name. "It's all right," the woman said. "He's here to help." Nora didn't move. She simply stared at Logan with those unblinking eyes, so still it was eerie. Her hands were clenched at her sides, but not out of fear. They were disciplined, trained. This was a girl who had been living in survival mode for far too long. Logan moved to the side of the cot, placed 2 fingers gently against the woman's neck. Pulse was fast and thready. Her fever was no joke. "I have fluids, meds, gear at my place," he said. "It's a few miles west." She reached for his arm with surprising speed and strength. "No, we can't leave. You can't call anyone. Why? Because he'll find us. If you call anyone, law enforcement, fire, even EMTs, he'll know. He's watching those systems. Everything. Who's he?" The woman closed her eyes for a moment, gathering what little strength she had. "Not now. Please, just don't bring anyone here." Logan pulled back slightly. She was terrified, but not of dying. She was terrified of being found. He looked at the girl again, still silent, still unmoving. Ghost, who had remained near the door, walked quietly over to her. And then something happened. The dog, trained to remain at Logan's heel in all conditions, sat down beside the girl. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his body and lay beside her. Not protective, not alert. Present. Nora didn't react. She didn't recoil. Instead, she reached out a tiny hand and rested it on his fur. It was the first human gesture Logan had seen her make. Ghost accepted it. He didn't move. Logan watched, something tightening in his chest. He'd seen Ghost drag wounded soldiers through gunfire, seen him leap into burning vehicles, seen him bark down the barrel of an insurgent's rifle without blinking. But never, not once, had he broken protocol. Not until now. Ghost was saying something Logan couldn't. Stay. Logan stood slowly. His decision was made before he knew it was happening. All right, he said. No cops, no calls, no noise. The woman exhaled, collapsing deeper into the cot, her last reserves spent. Nora didn't look up, but her hand stayed where it was. What's your name? Logan asked quietly. Elise. And hers? Nora. He nodded, turned toward the door. I'll be back before dark. She tried to sit up. No, wait, what if... But Logan cut her off with a look. Not cruel, not cold, certain. I'm not leaving you. His hand tapped his thigh. Ghost remained where he was. Good boy, Logan murmured. He opened the door and stepped into the mist. The forest didn't feel the same. It no longer pressed on him like a weight. It watched him now, as if curious what he would do next. The answer was simple. He was going to war again. But this time, he wasn't doing it for orders or country or honor. He was doing it for a child who hadn't spoken a word and a dog who had never lied. Logan moved through the forest like a ghost among trees. He didn't take the same path back. That was muscle memory, tactical instinct. Never retrace your steps unless you're ready to be followed. The canopy above him was a shifting patchwork of silver mist and dark branches. The air was thick, tasting of pine sap and wet stone. Every sense was turned on, not because of danger, but because of purpose. He had a mission again. It had been a long time since that meant something. Ghost trotted a few feet ahead, ears rotating with precision. His body language was focused, but not tense. The dog knew the terrain, knew the difference between wilderness and threat, knew when something wasn't right. He also knew when Logan's silence wasn't about stealth. It was memory. Logan's boots pushed over soft earth and layers of rotting leaves, and in his mind he was somewhere else, somewhere hotter, dirtier, more violent, Afghanistan, 13 months ago, the last mission. He could still see the ridgeline, smell the smoke, hear the crackle of radio static layered over screams. Dean Carver, his swim buddy, his brother, the only person who ever understood the dark without trying to fix it. And the dog. Ghost had been Dean's originally, trained by his hands, trusted by his voice. Dean used to joke that Ghost was the only living creature he respected more than Logan. They had been moving through a village suspected of harboring arms smugglers. Intel was off, turned out to be a trap. The explosion tore through the left flank. Dean didn't make it 5 steps before he was bleeding out in the dust. Logan had held pressure to the wound with one hand and fired his sidearm with the other. Ghost never barked. He just stood over Dean's chest like a shield and waited for the medevac that never came. Afterward, no one asked what happened to the dog. They all knew. Logan brought him home, but neither of them ever really left. A branch snapped underfoot. Present returned like a slap. He pushed through a curtain of vines and stepped into the clearing where his cabin sat, tucked between the slope and the sea like it was waiting for no one. Inside, everything was where it should be. Gear in footlockers. Bedrolls folded, water tank topped. No pictures, no trinkets, just order. He opened the emergency med kit and worked fast. IV fluids, antibiotics, thermometer strips, energy bars, water purification tablets, syringes, clean wraps. Everything that might matter in the next 12 hours. He hesitated over one item. The pistol. He took it. Not out of paranoia, out of experience. He slung the bag over his shoulder and whistled once. Ghost was already at the door. Logan closed the place behind him with the same care a man folds a flag. The hike back was harder. Not physically, mentally, he moved faster. The sense of urgency burned beneath his skin. Not panic, drive. Elise didn't have time to waste. When they reached the cabin, dusk was already creeping in. The trees whispered like old men, and the air had cooled to a damp chill. Logan stepped into the firelight again. Elise was worse. Her skin was waxy now, breath shallow. Nora was sitting beside her on the floor, hands folded in her lap, too still to be natural. Ghost walked straight to them, sat beside Nora like he'd never moved. Logan moved with swift precision, laid out the med kit, set up the IV line. His hands were steady, surgical. The saline bag hung from a loop of rope tied to the overhead beam. He crushed the antibiotics into a paste and held Elise's head gently as he helped her swallow. Her lips barely moved, but she didn't resist. Once the fluid was flowing and her breathing began to deepen, Logan sat back on his heels. He watched her chest rise and fall, counted each breath. The fever was breaking. She was going to live. A sound pulled his attention. Not a word, a movement. Nora had edged closer, not to him, but to the medkit. Her tiny fingers reached out and touched the empty saline pouch, then traced the line up to Elise's arm. She looked at Logan. Not afraid, not trusting, but curious. He held out a protein bar, broke it in half, offered her a piece. Nora took it. No words, just action. That was enough. He leaned back against the wall and felt the tension drain from his shoulders for the first time in days. Ghost shifted, pressing against Nora's side as she chewed quietly. The dog's eyes were half-lidded now, calm, but alert, like a sentry on break. Logan stared into the fire. He hadn't meant to care, but somewhere between the woman's fevered whisper and the girl's silent strength, something had reached the part of him he thought was dead. Not gone, just buried. And now maybe starting to stir. By morning the fever had broken. Elise was still pale, but the grey flush was gone. Her breathing had steadied, her pulse stronger. When Logan checked the IV, she was awake, watching him with eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. He poured her a cup of water, steadying her hand as she took it. She sipped slowly, then leaned back against the cot, exhaustion still clinging to her. Nora was curled up near the hearth, her head resting against Ghost's chest. The dog lay perfectly still, eyes half open, the slow rhythm of his breathing matching hers. Outside, rain whispered against the roof. The world beyond the cabin was nothing but mist and grey. Logan broke the silence first. "You said someone's looking for you. You need to tell me who." Elise stared at the fire, then at the floor, as if measuring the risk of words. "If I tell you, you'll wish you hadn't found us. Try me." Her fingers clenched around the blanket. For a moment, he thought she'd stay quiet. But then, the words started to come. Slow, fractured, trembling like someone trying to exhale a nightmare. "I used to work for a man named Grayson Voss, CEO of Voss Dynamics. Global data analytics, pharmaceuticals, artificial intelligence. He's not what people think he is." The name flickered in Logan's memory, something he'd heard in a half-read news report about tech monopolies and political donations. But Elise wasn't talking about business. Her voice had the raw edge of someone confessing a sin. "He's not chasing us for money," she said. "He's chasing us because I know what he's done, and because she's the only proof that matters." Her eyes went to the child. Logan frowned. He didn't interrupt. Years in interrogation rooms had taught him patience, Let people fill the silence. They always did. Nora's parents were killed in a car accident last year. She's his granddaughter, his only heir. He was named guardian. On paper, it all looked clean. But it wasn't. He wanted control of her, her trust fund, her future, everything. When I started working for him, I thought he was brilliant, a visionary. Then I saw what he was building. Logan's jaw tightened. Go on. He's been developing a behavioral conditioning compound, a drug meant to suppress emotion and heighten obedience. It started as a treatment for trauma, PTSD, dementia, autism spectrum disorders. But the trials, the real ones, they weren't voluntary. Voss used children from his private foundation, orphans, kids who wouldn't be missed. Her voice broke, and then he started testing on his own granddaughter. The air seemed to thicken. Even Ghost lifted his head slightly, as if the truth itself had a sound. Elise kept talking, her tone flat, controlled, like she was forcing herself to stay steady by clinging to the details. He said it was therapy, said she had behavioral issues, but she was 5 years old. He was giving her doses strong enough to sedate grown men. She stopped laughing, stopped speaking. She'd sit for hours just staring at the wall. That's what he wanted. Compliance. He was rewriting her personality. Logan felt something twist in his chest. He looked at Nora, small, silent but alert. A child trapped between survival and numbness. So you took her, he said quietly. I had to. I found the lab reports, the supply records, the injection logs. He was going to institutionalize her, to keep experimenting without oversight. I couldn't let that happen. He studied her face. She wasn't lying. The tremor in her voice wasn't fear. It was guilt. You're her mother, he asked. Elise's reaction was subtle, but sharp. Her gaze broke. Her voice came out like the scrape of sandpaper. No. Logan's hand stilled. The fire popped in the hearth, sending up a spark that died before it reached the ceiling. Then who are you? Her answer landed like a quiet explosion. I was his assistant. For a moment, the only sound was the rain. Ghost's tail shifted slightly, brushing against the floorboards like the sweep of a clock hand. I arranged his travel, managed his schedule, filtered his calls. I saw everything. The meetings, the experiments, the payoffs. I wasn't brave enough to stop him at first, but when I saw what he was doing to her, something broke. I took what evidence I could and ran. Logan leaned back, processing. The story was too specific, too detailed to be fiction. He'd seen this kind of corruption before, only not in boardrooms, but in war zones. How far will he go to find you? Elise met his eyes for the first time since she started speaking. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. He won't stop. Outside, the wind shifted direction, rattling the cabin walls like a warning. Ghost rose from the floor in one fluid motion, ears erect, eyes fixed on the dark window. He growled low, not loud, just enough for Logan to understand. Movement, far off, not close yet, but there. Logan crossed the room and peered through a gap in the curtain. Nothing but trees and fog. Still, he trusted the dog more than his own eyes. He turned back to Elise. Whatever you took, he said, you should tell me now. She hesitated. Then she reached under the cot and pulled out a small waterproof case, worn from travel. Inside, nested between folded documents, was a sleek, black data drive. Everything I found, she said. Research notes, financial ledgers, experimental results. Enough to bury him if it ever saw daylight. Logan closed the case, his expression unreadable. You realize you didn't just steal evidence. You stole the reason he built it. She blinked. What? He wasn't just trying to control people? Logan said. He was testing how far loyalty could be engineered. And now he's going to send someone who doesn't need to be programmed to find you. Ghost gave another low rumble, staring at the window. Elise swallowed hard. What are you saying? Logan checked the slide on his pistol, his tone steady. I'm saying we're not alone anymore. The storm outside broke in earnest, wind howling through the trees. Ghost moved closer to the door, his muscles tense, his eyes bright and alive. Logan felt the shift inside him again, the one he'd sworn never to feel. Purpose, duty, the old rhythm. He looked at Elise, at the drive, at the child asleep by the fire. He had been running from war, but it had just found him again. The rain didn't let up. By nightfall, the storm had curled itself around the cabin like a living thing. Wind slammed into the walls in waves, and water streaked down the small window panes, turning the outside world into a shifting blur of darkness and motion. Inside, the fire hissed. The heat it gave off barely touched the cold that had settled into Logan's bones. He sat at the edge of the cot, staring into the flames. Behind him, Elise slept fitfully, the fever gone, but the exhaustion deeper than any wound. Nora was curled near Ghost, who lay in front of the door like a statue. Logan's pistol rested across his knees. He hadn't spoken in hours. His mind was a battlefield. He could walk away, pack the essentials, disappear down a logging trail, leave before whatever was coming arrived. He had done it before. He had watched the mission fall apart, watched Dean die with a bullet in his gut, and Ghost holding the line until the very last round. And when the dust settled and the evac never came, Logan had done the only thing his training never prepared him for. He quit. Since then, he hadn't protected anyone, not even himself. Now here it was again, a woman, a child, a choice. He could hear Dean's voice in his head, echoing from some half-drunk night overseas. You don't get to pick the war, brother. Just whether or not you stand when it comes knocking. Ghost shifted. Logan looked down. The dog was no longer sleeping. He was up, ears back, body tense. Something was wrong. Logan stood quickly, scanned the room. Nora was gone. His blood went cold. He crossed to the back of the cabin. The rear window had been unlatched, open just enough for a small figure to squeeze through. The storm outside masked the sound. The girl had slipped into the dark, unnoticed. Elise! He snapped, shaking her shoulder. Where's Nora? She sat up, dazed. What? She's gone. Ghost was already at the door, nose low, tail still, alert. Elise's face turned ashen. She never does that. She never just leaves. Stay here, Logan said. Lock the door behind me. He was already moving. Ghost pushed into the storm first, Logan at his heels. Rain slashed across his face, and the wind howled like a warning. The forest loomed, a black wall of soaked branches and shifting shadows. They searched the perimeter, Ghost weaving through the trees, head down, sniffing fast. Then he stopped, gave a short, sharp bark. Trail. Logan followed. The girl's footprints were shallow, nearly invisible in the mud. But Ghost had her scent. They pushed deeper into the forest, past the line where human noise didn't reach. Lightning flashed, turning the world white for a split second. And there she was, huddled against a log, shivering, soaked to the skin. Ghost reached her first. He didn't bark. He simply pressed his body against hers and stayed there. Logan crouched in front of her, breath sharp in his chest. Nora, he said. She looked up. Her eyes weren't scared. They were empty. She held something in her hand. A picture? Elise's, maybe. A photo that had slipped from a pack. It showed Nora as a baby, held by her real mother. She must have taken it from the bag, must have gone looking for something she couldn't name. Logan reached for her. It's okay. We've got you. But before he could touch her, A sound snapped through the trees, a branch cracking, too deliberate to be the wind. Logan turned fast, instincts kicking hard. He drew his pistol, scanned the trees. Nothing. Ghost growled, his body coiled tight. Then came the flash. A sharp crack of movement to the left. Logan didn't fire. He couldn't see the target, but someone had been watching, too close, too bold. He grabbed Nora in one arm, motioned to Ghost, and moved fast. Back through the rain, through thorns and slick ground. No time to look back. The presence in the woods didn't follow, but it had made its point. They weren't alone. Back in the cabin, Elise threw open the door at the sound of Logan's boots on the porch. Nora. She wrapped the child in a blanket, pressed her forehead to hers, whispering fast, frantic words. Logan watched, breath coming in hard, as Ghost shook the water from his coat and dropped to the floor with a soft grunt. Logan knelt beside him. That's when he saw the blood. A gash on Ghost's side. Shallow but angry and raw, likely from a thorn or a sharp rock. But it wasn't the wound that hit Logan. It was what it meant. Ghost had put himself between the girl and whatever had been out there, without command, without hesitation. He hadn't hesitated when Dean went down either. Logan stared at the blood, the rise and fall of Ghost's chest, the flicker of Nora's eyes as she moved to kneel beside him, her small hand resting on the dog's side. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Logan stood. He walked to the fire. And this time, he didn't sit. He pulled the rucksack from the wall and started packing. Elise looked up. "What are you doing?" "Fortifying this place. You said we had to keep it quiet." "Not anymore." He moved with purpose now, checked his weapons, unloaded the medical kit, pulled out a map and began marking possible approach routes, choke points, fallback paths. "But Logan," she began. He looked at her. "We're not running." "We?" Logan nodded. "You said he won't stop. So neither will I." Ghost thumped his tail once against the floor. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, a new storm had just begun. The silence before contact was worse than the gunfire that would follow. It was just past 4 a.m. Logan sat near the front window, pistol in hand, boots on, knife sheathed at his thigh. The map on the table was folded, committed to memory. The kettle on the stove was cold. His breath was slow, measured. Ghost lay by the door, wide awake, head lifted, ears twitching at every shift in the wind. Then came the signal. Ghost's body went still, muscles locked, eyes fixed on the tree line. Logan rose without a word, moved to the small clearing in the front of the cabin, and raised his binoculars. Scanned. 3 shapes, moving slow, disciplined. Not lost hikers, operators. One on the ridge covering high ground, another moving along the north side, the third taking position to the west. Flanking. They knew what they were doing. Logan moved fast. He shook Elise awake. She jolted upright, grabbing for Nora beside her. "They found us," Logan said. "You and Nora to the back wall, behind the stove. It's stone and dense. They'll expect us to use the bedroom. Don't make a sound." "What about you?" "I hold the front." He turned to Ghost. "You're with me." The dog rose silently. In the clearing, a voice rang out, amplified, calm, and devoid of emotion. Elise Marlowe. "We have the cabin surrounded. I'm Wyatt Kane. I work for Mr. Voss. He wants the girl. We want to avoid a mess. Come out," hands raised. "No one gets hurt." Logan muttered under his breath. They always say that before someone gets hurt. He positioned himself near the window, pistol drawn. Ghost crouched low beside him, a shadow of black and muscle. No response? Wyatt's voice came again. "That's a shame. 10 seconds, Elise. Then we breach." Logan didn't wait. He gave Ghost a quick hand signal, "Stay," and kicked open the door. The sudden move caught them off guard. The closest operator staggered at the shock. Logan fired 2 controlled shots, hitting the man in the vest, sending him sprawling into the mud. The second figure dropped to a crouch, rifle raised. Ghost lunged like a missile. He hit the man mid-charge, sinking his teeth into the thigh with brutal precision. The man screamed, dropped his weapon, and fell back, struggling against the force of 85 pounds of trained fury. Logan fired again, hit the shoulder. But it wasn't enough. From the tree line, Wyatt moved in. Calm, efficient. Firing short bursts to keep Logan pinned behind the doorframe. His precision was surgical, his cover tight. A flash of movement at Logan's flank. The first operator, not fully down, had crawled into firing position. Gunshots cracked through the cold. Logan ducked, rolled behind the woodpile, barely avoiding the spray of bullets. Inside the cabin, Elise held Nora against her chest, both of them crouched low. She could hear the chaos outside. Yells, barks, metal on dirt. Then, something rolled through the open door. A flashbang. Elise screamed. Logan turned just as it detonated. A burst of white light. A concussion that slammed the air out of his lungs. Ears ringing. Vision swimming. Boots on the floor. Gun pressed to his back. "Drop it, soldier," Wyatt's voice said flatly. Logan had no choice. His pistol clattered to the floor. He was hauled to his knees. Zip ties clamped around his wrists. Ghost was restrained by another merc, blood on his snout, fur bristling. Wyatt stepped into the cabin like he was walking into a meeting room. Calm, clean, professional. He looked at Elise. "You made this unnecessarily difficult, Miss Marlowe. But my employer is generous. We'll let you live." He turned to Logan. "This one, he's optional." Wyatt raised his weapon. Logan stared him down. He didn't flinch, but Elise stepped forward. "Don't." Wyatt cocked his head, weapon steady. "You have nothing to bargain with." "Yes, I do." She was trembling, but her voice held. "You think this ends if we die? You think Voss is safe?" Wyatt said nothing. Elise took a deep breath. "I set a dead man switch. If I don't log into a private node every 24 hours, all the files I stole, everything, goes public. FBI, media, everyone." Wyatt blinked once. "I'm not bluffing," she continued. "I used his own encryption systems to program the trigger. You kill me, you bury the leverage." "And Voss burns." Wyatt lowered the rifle by an inch. Even Logan froze. "You expect me to believe that?" "Ask Voss," she said coldly. "He'll know it's true." Outside, thunder cracked across the sky. Inside, silence stretched. Wyatt slowly holstered his weapon. "You're very clever, Miss Marlowe." He turned to his men. "Stand down." The mercenaries hesitated, unsure. "She's more valuable alive," Wyatt said. "For now." Logan's hands were still bound. But in that moment, the power in the room shifted. Because for the first time, Wyatt wasn't completely in control. The bluff had worked. For now. Wyatt Kane stood at the edge of the cabin porch, staring into the forest like it might answer for the mess they were all tangled in. The wind carried smoke from the burned shed, curling around him like the ghosts of the past. His jaw tightened, eyes flicking toward Logan, who was leaning against a post, arms crossed, calm. But not soft. "You know the Blackwatch contract has a clause." Wyatt muttered, eyes narrowing. "No loose ends." Logan didn't flinch. "I'm not asking you to leave loose ends. I'm offering you the cleanest closure you've ever had." Wyatt scoffed. 3 people vanish from a compound surrounded by satellite surveillance? That's not clean. That's suicidal." Logan tilted his head. "Not if they're already dead. On paper." Silence. Only the soft, rhythmic panting of Ghost nearby, ears perked, as if following every word. Logan continued, voice low. "You torch the place. Cabin burns down in the night. 3 bodies, planted by you, unidentifiable. The investigation ends before it starts. Julian Croft has nothing to chase. You disappear. We disappear." Wyatt looked at him for a long time, calculating. The soldier in him wanted order. The mercenary wanted silence. The man in him, well, that part was broken long ago. "And what's in it for you?" Wyatt asked. "Freedom. For a mother and child." Logan said. "A reset for me. And for Ghost." Ghost shifted his weight, stepping forward once, almost like punctuation. Wyatt exhaled sharply. "You're really trusting me with this?" "I'm trusting your desire to not be hunted by Croft for the rest of your life. You burn it all. You walk. No more ghosts." Ghost gave a low, quiet bark at the word. Wyatt stared at the dog, old scars on his flank visible even in the low light, and something flickered in the mercenary's expression. "Fine," he said, "but we do it my way." That night, the sky over Blacktail Ridge lit up orange. Flames roared through the old wood, swallowing every trace of their presence. Wyatt had done it well, too. Well, he even left blood and burned clothes lifted from one of Croft's own black sites. Ghost helped drag items into place, each movement precise. At one point, he froze, nose in the wind, then looked back at Logan with a whine, like asking permission to continue. Logan nodded. "It's okay, boy. One last mission." Sarah and Ilara stayed hidden in the nearby ravine, wrapped in blankets. Ilara's eyes wide, trembling, watching the fire consume what had become a kind of sanctuary. Sarah clutched her daughter close, tears streaming silently, not from fear, but from the weight of letting go. Hours later, when the smoke thinned and embers whispered goodbye, Wyatt approached Logan for the last time. "No one will find you," he said. "Croft will think I silenced you all. It'll buy you time. Maybe peace." Logan reached out. Wyatt didn't shake it, but he nodded. Then, without another word, he turned and vanished into the tree line. Ghost stared after him, ears twitching, then returned to Logan's side. "You think he'll really walk away?" Sarah asked quietly, stepping up beside them. "No," Logan said, "but he'll vanish. He knows how." And he did. By morning, the cabin was nothing but ash and stories. The official report, leaked by Wyatt himself, read, "Mercenary site compromised. Hostages presumed dead. Operation failed. Site destroyed." Ghost lay beside Logan as he read the file. Logan dropped it into the fire and watched the paper curl. Ilara came out and sat by Ghost, her little hand resting on his fur. He leaned into her gently, like he knew she needed to feel someone steady. And for the first time in days, Logan closed his eyes, knowing, for now, they were free. Ghost, ever alert, kept his head up, scanning the tree line, still guarding. The cabin stood miles from the nearest paved road, nestled deep in a forest of pine and fog. You couldn't find it on a map, even if you knew what you were looking for. That was the point. They'd been there for 6 weeks. Elise sat on the front steps, a wool blanket around her shoulders. Her cheek still bore a faint scar. What the surgeons couldn't erase, the silence did. And there, beside her, was Nora. Laughing. Laughing. It started small. Just a smile when Logan accidentally spilled powdered sugar on himself trying to cook breakfast. Then a sound. A breath through her nose, a stifled giggle. Now a full laugh. It was rusty, unpracticed, but real. Elise blinked fast, as if tears might make it disappear. Inside, the wood stove crackled. Logan was fixing the leaky faucet, shirt off, hands calloused. He'd lost weight, more from letting go than from lack of food. His nightmares came less often now, and when they did, they didn't control him. He still checked the perimeter every night. But for the first time in years, he slept through till morning. Ghost did not. The German Shepherd was slower now, a little more grey around the muzzle. but his ears still pricked at the faintest crunch of leaves outside. His body, though aged, moved with the same purpose, like the mission hadn't ended, just changed coordinates. Some mornings Ghost would sit at the cabin door, waiting. Not for enemies, but for Elise to open it. He only moved once she stepped outside, as if to say, "You're not going out there without me." And yet, even peace had its shadows. One evening, Logan picked up a faint radio signal on the old shortwave he'd repaired. A missing persons report. A girl matching Nora's description disappeared from a hospital in New York. Croft's reach still lingered. Somewhere, someone was still looking. And worse, someone might talk. Elise paced the cabin that night, her fingers clenched. "We can't run forever," she said. "You're not," Logan replied. "We're not running. We're rebuilding. But what if they find us?" Logan glanced toward the corner of the room, where Ghost lay curled on the rug, his eyes half closed, but ears twitching at the sound of Elise's voice. "They won't," Logan said. "Not with him here." That night, Nora spoke in full sentences. She whispered to Ghost while brushing his fur with trembling fingers. "Thank you for coming back." Ghost didn't wag his tail, but he didn't need to. 2 days later, Elise found something odd near the creek. A trail of boot prints. Recent, not Logan's. Logan checked the security cameras. Static. Someone had tampered with them. Ghost barked once, sharply, then growled low, moving toward the door. Elise froze. "Logan." He was already at the weapons chest. But when they burst through the door, rifles raised, they found nothing. Just the prints. No scent trail. Ghost sniffed and circled but didn't chase. He returned to the cabin door and sat. The message was clear. Whoever it was, they wanted to be seen. Logan spent that night on the roof with binoculars. Elise sat inside, arms wrapped around Nora, who stared into the fire, quiet again. But her hand never left Ghost's back. He was their sentry, their guard tower, their final alarm. By morning, the threat seemed to pass. No more tracks, no sounds. Ghost stood watch until sunrise, then finally laid down beside Logan, exhaling slow. Elise came out with coffee. "You didn't sleep." Logan shook his head. "You still think it's not running?" "I think," Logan said slowly, "there's a difference between hiding and healing. One buys time, the other buys life." Ghost lifted his head and looked at Logan, then Elise. His eyes weren't tired, just aware, always watching. Later that week, Logan returned from town with a faded newspaper. Croft's assets frozen. Investigation reopened. He read aloud. A whisper of justice. A door creaked open. Elise didn't say a word. She just took Nora's hand and walked out to the porch. Sat on the step. Closed her eyes. Nora leaned against her. Ghost followed and sat beside them, not touching, just present. Watching the trees. They stayed in that cabin through the winter. Nora learned to read again. Elise learned to paint again. Logan learned to breathe again. And Ghost, he never stopped guarding. Not out of fear, but out of loyalty. And love. 1 year later. The cabin stood quiet under the summer sun, but it no longer felt like a place of hiding. It was a sanctuary now. The garden had grown wild with lavender and sage. Children's laughter occasionally echoed through the trees. And out back, near the edge of the forest, a wooden sign read, "Camp Hollow." Beneath it, a simple carving. Guarded by Ghost. Logan adjusted the straps of a young boy's backpack as the small group gathered around the fire pit. The boy, maybe 10, avoided eye contact, his hands fidgeting. "You tie it like this," Logan said gently, showing him how to secure the knot. "See? It holds you but doesn't choke you. Like a good teammate. The boy nodded, eyes darting towards the German shepherd sprawled beside the pit. Ghost, no longer the scarred shadow of war, but a calm sentinel. He watched the kids with eyes both patient and alert. The jagged line of fur over his healed burn still showed, but it no longer defined him. Across the yard, Elise handed out sandwiches, her once wary presence now replaced by a grounded warmth. She caught Logan's eye, gave a small smile, and returned to checking the first aid kits with another vet who had lost a leg in Kandahar, but now taught the kids how to build a stretcher from scratch. Inside the cabin, Nora sat cross-legged with a sketch pad in her lap. She wasn't the quiet, withdrawn child anymore. Her therapist had called it a breakthrough when she spoke during one of the sessions, naming her fears aloud for the first time. But it was her drawings that said the most. Page after page, ghost, ghost in the snow, ghost at her feet, ghost standing between her and the world. Today she was drawing him lying beside the fire pit, one ear half up, alert even in rest. "Are you ever going to draw anything else?" Logan teased, stepping inside and brushing dirt from his jeans. Nora shrugged. "Maybe. But he's easier to understand than people." "Fair point." Logan thought. Later that afternoon, a group of veterans arrived from the city, men and women who had signed up for a week-long survival course. Some came with visible injuries. Others carried what Logan recognized in their posture, the slow flinch, the haunted blink. He'd worn it too once. They unloaded gear and gathered in a half-circle as Logan gave the welcome talk. Elise stood by with a clipboard, while Ghost sat at Logan's heel, quiet but commanding. "What we teach here isn't just knots and fires," Logan said. "It's trust, it's teamwork, and sometimes it's just learning how to be still again." One vet raised his hand. "Is the dog part of the program?" Logan smiled. "He's the best part." They all turned to Ghost. "He served more years than I did," Logan said. "Saw more than most humans ever should. But he came out of it not bitter, not broken, just still guarding." That night they held a bonfire. Music played softly on an old speaker. Someone made jokes, someone else cried. No one mocked it. They passed around stories like offerings, and when the silence finally fell, it wasn't heavy. It felt earned. Nora came out with her sketchbook tucked under her arm. She handed Logan a fresh page. This one was different. It showed Ghost, but not alone. It was him surrounded by kids, veterans, even Elise. And behind them, a trail of paw prints leading back into the forest. Logan stared at the drawing for a long time. "You think he's happy?" Nora asked. "He's not just happy," Logan said quietly. "He knows he matters." A week later, a journalist came by. She'd heard whispers of a place in the woods where broken people and forgotten heroes were rebuilding each other. She wasn't ready for what she found. "I thought I'd be writing about a dog," she said, watching Ghost nudge a nervous teen into joining the group. "You are," Elise replied. "Just not the kind of story you're used to." The article went viral. Donations flooded in. A retired general offered to expand the cabin into a full training lodge. A father from Utah drove 3 days just to say thank you. His son had started speaking again after one weekend with Ghost. But the story that stuck wasn't in the newsprint. It was in the small gestures. A child sleeping without nightmares, a vet not reaching for a drink, someone smiling again because a dog decided they were worth guarding. Ghost never wore a vest again. He didn't need one. The scars on his back stayed. But so did the dignity in his walk, the awareness in his gaze, and the quiet message he gave to every person who came through those woods. You are not alone. And when the wind rustled through the trees at night, it almost sounded like breathing, still watching, still guarding. Always, evening fell soft over Pine Bluff Ridge. Logan sat on the edge of the porch, his elbows resting on his knees, a blanket of silence wrapping the cabin like a second skin. Behind him, Elise scribbled into her worn leather journal, pausing occasionally to glance towards the fading sun. A few yards ahead, Nora's laughter echoed beneath the trees as she tossed a stick across the grass. Ghost, a little slower now, greyer around the muzzle, bounded after it with the kind of focus only a soldier's dog could still summon. Logan watched them in quiet awe. The girl he once thought he could never protect. The woman who taught him how to heal. The dog who never left his side, even when everything else had. Ghost returned with the stick and dropped it near Nora's feet, panting but alert. His ears twitched at a sound only he could hear, and his eyes scanned the tree line, not with fear, but with duty. Always watching, always guarding. Still guarding, huh, boy? Logan whispered, reaching down to scratch behind Ghost's ears. Ghost leaned into the touch, eyes briefly closing before snapping open again at a rustle in the wind. Inside the cabin, Elise's voice broke the silence, reading aloud from her journal. He didn't just survive war. He brought peace to a place that forgot it was allowed to feel safe again. A low hum came from the old radio Logan had left on the windowsill. A podcast began playing, one Elise had queued for tonight. Tonight we honor not just a soldier and a dog, but the choice to protect what matters, not for medals, not for fame, but for love, for truth, for the kind of silence that only loyalty can hold. Nora ran back to the porch, breathless and glowing, her curls wild from the wind. "Daddy, Ghost still wants to play." Logan smiled. "I think he always will." She wrapped her arms around the dog's neck, and Ghost stood still, allowing her embrace like it was the most sacred duty he'd ever known. The sun dipped lower. A breeze carried the scent of pine and something softer, hope, maybe. Elise closed her journal. Ghost lifted his head one last time, scanning the horizon. Calm, present, at peace, but alert. The screen slowly faded to black, and the words appeared. He didn't dig for gold. He dug for truth. What's your story with a loyal pet? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that loyalty never fades. Subscribe to German Shepherd for more true stories of healing, courage, and the dogs that never stop guarding.